you check the children? Show a little match sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes. That is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
And you got Jaime and Fuego here.
And we are doing one more roundup from the Phoenix Film Festival and the International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival. Fuego saw an awful lot. We saw a couple things together.
Still missed a few things though, unfortunately, based on both of our corresponding schedules, but we saw most of it.
We did as well as we could. We saw at least 12 to 14 things, so not terrible, but we're going to be talking about the final three things that we haven't talked about yet, and that is going to be Fuego, the first film we should talk about is BirthRebirth.
Damn right, and this was directed by Laura Moss, and I've got my handy program out as I did with the last couple episodes, and this was starring Marin Ireland and Judy Reyes, and man, this one hit like a sack of bricks to the back of the head as far as a heavy concept. A little bit similar in some ways to From Black about, you lose a child and how far you would go to get them back, but this one in comparison, where From Black had an essence of mysticism to it, this one was going from a clinical, like straight up medical standpoint, and
scientific,
I feel yes, big time. And I was a big fan of this, man. I mean, just how, what's the word that I'm looking for Marin Ireland's performance in this? She is just so, she's cold, and she's very of the scientific approach. She's an unemotional, just very calculated. I will do everything in my power to continue my studies, and we'll get to that in the actual thing. But Judy Reyes as the empathetic, corresponding sort of presence within her, she actually kind of makes Marin's character a little bit more feely, so to speak, as stuff plays out. But I was very impressed with this movie. Laura directed it splendidly with her, her cinematographer, and once again, I mean, heavy concepts here, and the whole, would you, and what is the cost? What could potentially happen if you're willing to give in? So,
yeah, this was an excellently pulled off movie. I mean, it's a heavy subject for sure. One person is trying to conquer death after a fashion. Another person is forced into a position to have to try and conquer death in order to keep one of their loved ones around. And, it was really engaging the whole way through. Again, it's not terribly dissimilar from Black, but it is a different enough storyline that you can't really compare the two as far as stories go, other than the fact that it deals with lost little loved ones.
Yeah, exactly. Which Pet Cemetery, which I mean,
any number of films.
A dark song, whatever it may be. And so,
but this was more clinical, like you said. This was more medically, charged and trying to do it from more of a scientific standpoint, and that was really interesting to me.
Yeah, and for that reason, it is like science fiction to a degree, because of the fact that how possible is what is being put forth here, but it seems more plausible than deniable in a lot of ways. And so if we're going to jump into the story, so essentially we have the Judy Reyes character, and her daughter is sick on a day when she oversleeps and has to run to work, and she's like, oh, you're going to go to school, and her daughter is like, no, I'm not feeling good, and so leaves her with the neighbor across the way in their apartment complex in Los Angeles, and lo and behold, her daughter dies.
Yes, it's a very rapidly spreading infection of bacterial meningitis. And while Reyes' character is kept at work, and she thinks, silencing phone calls where they're trying to tell her that her daughter is really in a bad way, and she gets out of it, unfortunately, after it's already done, and you just your heart breaks for this character immediately. But there's a cagey doctor, where her child has sort of not gone the usual route post-mortem, and it's confusing to her, and she's trying to figure out why. And then this doctor is withholding secrets, and it causes both of their stories to intertwine in a really clever and interesting way, but a heartbreaking way as well. But it puts the story forward for the rest of the film, and I thought it was a really engaging story that all of the actors did their utmost to portray in such an engaging way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the interplay between race and Ireland is very interesting because, as I was just alluding to, like, one is very cold and calculated, scientific in that regard, and the other one is, you know, caring and compassionate, and, you know, one is a mother, or was a mother, you know, until her daughter died. And so the pairing of these two, they're almost like they're helping each other in some way, but we're dancing around this because we don't want to spoil how the dead are potentially going to be brought back with this sort of research that Ireland's character is doing, because dare I say it's pretty twisted, and yet that's what makes the movie so interesting in a lot of ways. So it is very much a slow burn in that regard. Don't expect, like, you know, Pet Sematary levels of, you know, like, you know, a resurrected child slicing people up in some crazy fashion. Well, now I think, anyway, you know, but yeah, From Black was incredibly impressive. This is another one, guys, that is going to be going to Shudder, and so.
Are you talking about BirthRebirth?
BirthRebirth. Did I say From Black?
You said From Black.
Oh, God damn it! Well, there is so much exceptional content that is going to Shudder in the coming months, and yes, BirthRebirth, which we were just talking about with Judy Reyes, Marin Ireland. Yes, keep an eye out for that coming to Shudder.
Yep, indeed. So what's next on the docket after that?
Yes, next up we have Satanic Hispanics, and this is one that we were...
Anthological horror, baby.
Yeah, and this is one that has like a ton of different amazing Latino directors and stars that were a part of the process. So you had Mike Mendez, you had Demian Rugna, Eduardo Sanchez, Gigi Sal Guerrero. I have to mention them all. I can't hold any of them out. And Alejandro Brujuez. I'm probably butchering some names, unfortunately, despite my moniker. But I know one of them, for instance, was was it Terrified? The one that we like so much from South America, yeah. So there's an installment from that. So you have a wraparound, which is done with, interestingly enough, our Vote for Pedro guy from Napoleon Dynamite. So he is essentially a character that is discovered by law enforcement in El Paso when they raid this place where there's a bunch of dead bodies, and he's the only survivor left. And he's taken into custody, and they're interrogating him, and he kind of calls himself the Traveler. And they're trying to ID him, and they're like, wait, he looks the same as he did when he was taken into custody 20 years ago and 40 years ago and all this. And they're like, you're ageless. And so he is kind of our wraparound in, he tells these two interrogation officers tales.
Right.
Yeah, and there's a number of them. And so you get a little bit of everything. I mean, you get a...
There's a vampire story. There's a werewolf story. There's...
There's an interesting, like, my house is haunted, and you know, nobody thinks it's possible, like the pizza guy with that one dude when he's trying to, you know, turn on show the light
show,
and then lo and behold, a real paranormal investigator shows up, and he's like, he immediately leaves scared, and we get some great practical effects in that one, and you know,
and then there's some heavier, you know, storylines too that are part of the anthology. That
so it veers back and forth between comedic and just much more serious, which I appreciated the tone jumping. And dude, I think it was the fifth story, or maybe it was the fourth one. Anyway, it was near the end of the film, and it was one where there was a possession demon sort of thing jumping from person to person, and these two people who were at that vacation, whatever. Essentially, they're sitting in a restaurant, and one is the ex.
One of them is explaining why all of their
we've
friends
seen
are
this,
dead, and then explaining that they actually tried to trap the other because they believe they're the evil and stuff. And it's just a really engaging story.
It's got a great surf rock song on it that's featured in the trailer, I should specify. And
like most anthologies, there are stronger stories than others.
Lesser bits. But I mean, when it hits, it really hits, and you have so much talent in this. I mean, I can't wait to see. I don't know if it's lined up for a particular streamer already or VOD or whatever. It's still in the festival circuit, but this is one that I think it's like 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, and rightfully so.
Wouldn't be surprising.
You know,
it was a very well done movie.
Yeah, it's a crowd pleaser. Is a cliched term that a lot of us talk about, but yeah, Satanic Hispanics, man. Good fucking time. I was very, very much enjoying this one.
Indeed. So that brings us to the last one.
Yeah, unfortunately, the one that we weren't quite as hot on. That's not to say another one going to Shudder. You know, I feel like we've just everything Shudder. This was entitled "The Angry Black Girl
and Her Monster."
Yeah, directed by Bomani J. Story. And so this is a modern day retelling of Frankenstein,
Mm-hmm.
and it's done through the lens of a young black girl whose brother dies in the midst of like gang and drug related violence.
Yep.
And so this horrible empty spot within her life is obviously there, and the father especially is really taking it hard. That dinner scene is really rough, where they're all just kind of remembering him.
Very
and
raw.
And some of his quips and whatnot. The issue that I had with this film was not the acting and not the fact that it was a reimagining of source material. I wasn't so hot on the monster design.
Yeah.
The kills didn't really work as well for me, and also the fact that we veered into like forcing her to cook drugs because she
Right.
won't reveal information. Like those are some scripting bits that I wasn't as fond of. So I wouldn't veer as far as I did in the previous video where I was talking about, you know, what a dark, how was it called? I just want to, sorry, a dark room, which was the worst thing I saw at the festival. This had redeeming qualities for sure, and but I don't know. I just wasn't as on board for it. What do you think?
Yeah, honestly, the story wasn't as engaging as I was hoping it would be. It was well shot.
Yeah.
It was well acted, but the story just didn't capture my attention. The monster, the way they portrayed the monster / dead brother kind of thing, it just didn't do enough for me to really keep me engaged and tell really engaging, I don't know, aspects of this particular story where I cared what the relationship was between this young woman and her brother who is posthumously interacting with her. You know what I mean? You'd think there'd be a lot to mine there, but there just wasn't really much mining going on.
And you're reminding me of how well shot it was, though, because the
Yeah.
fact that there were a few scenes in particular, like where she was looking through that hole in the wall, and the younger girl who was aware of her brother, the monster, and everything, is just looking creepily at our mad scientist girl. And there's another scene where she's like creating and laughing and everything that I felt didn't fit the tone of the rest of the film.
Right.
You know, it almost had kind of a cheese factor to it that like pretty much everything else plays it pretty straight throughout the rest of the film, and that scene kind of stuck out like a sore thumb to me. However, I could talk about another scene that was amazing that hit me hard in the feels, where the father sees his son back walking around his home. Things don't necessarily go very well, but this is not something that I'm gonna like condemn as being crap or anything like that, but it just was one that I found a little bit lacking, and I'll just leave it at that.
No, I agree. I think that's as much as we can say about it. It was a solid idea. It was executed well for what it was, but it just wasn't as engaging as we were hoping it would be the whole way through.
Well, also there's something with a character kind of switching affiliations in the third
Right.
act that I had some issues with, a team up of sorts, and so I don't know. All in all, though, I have to give a major just bit of props to Monty, and just the fact that all three of these films that we just discussed, how drastically different were they?
Yep.
You know, variety is key with
Well
everything
showcased.
Monty does, man.
Yep.
You know,
Well
and the fact that
showcased.
even if everything doesn't resound with me or Cecil, it's like, damn, dude, you programmed there's something drastically different just about any evening, and so please keep your eye on Horror Sci-Fi Fest on the socials and stuff when this returns next year. It's always late March, early April that the proceedings go down. So yeah, show some support if you guys are even close by or want to make a trek. Keep it on your radars.
Indeed. So thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting the channel the way that you do. We greatly appreciate it. Make sure you check out the Phoenix Film Festival and the International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival every single year to make sure you go and find your favorite new movie.
There it is.
So thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
Gracias, Jaime and Fuego.
And remember, stay scared.